Retro-real presence.
Welcome to the chilling tale of the Smurl Haunting, a story that captivated paranormal enthusiasts and skeptics alike. In the 1970s, one family found themselves trapped in a horrifying series of supernatural events. For over a decade, the Smurl family endured unexplained noises, physical assaults, and sightings of ghostly apparitions that shook them to the core. But was this truly a haunting, or a case of intense psychological stress? Tonight, we dive deep into the dark and mysterious events of the Smurl Haunting. Our story begins in 1973, when Jack and Janet Smurl, along with their 4 daughters, moved into a modest duplex in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. The Smurls shared the home with Jack's parents, who lived on one side, while the Smurl family took the other. But soon after moving in, the family began experiencing odd occurrences. Initially, it was small things, strange noises, misplaced objects, and cold spots throughout the house. They brushed these off as normal quirks of an old house. But as time went on, these small annoyances would turn into terrifying experiences. At first, the disturbances were small enough to ignore. Janet and Jack chalked it up to the quirks of an old house. Lights would flicker without warning, casting eerie shadows in the dimly lit rooms, and doors would close on their own as if a gentle breeze pushed them, but there was never a breeze to be felt. Janet tried to convince herself it was the house settling. Then came the strange knocking sounds. Late at night, when the house was quiet, a tapping sound would begin inside the walls. It would echo through the rooms, steady and deliberate, as if something was trying to get their attention. When Jack and Janet tried to locate the source, the sound would stop only to start again in a different room. Even more unsettling were the cold spots. Janet would feel an icy chill as she moved through the house, a sensation so sudden and unnatural it made her pause. She would rub her arms, feeling the goosebumps rise. Yet the windows were all shut tight, and the heating was on full blast. It was as if something unseen was following her. It was around this time that Janet began to feel as though she was never truly alone. She'd catch herself glancing over her shoulder, feeling eyes on her back, a silent, unsettling presence lurking just out of sight. The sense of being watched was so intense, yet when she turned to look, there was nothing, and no one. These occurrences were strange and unnerving, but they were small enough for the Smurls to try to ignore. They convinced themselves it was all coincidence or imagination, but deep down, they sensed something was beginning to stir within the walls of their home, something that wasn't quite human. As the weeks went by, the strange disturbances in the Smurl home became more intense. Jack and Janet began seeing dark, shadowy figures, often lurking in the corner of rooms or reflected in mirrors. These figures were not fully formed, distorted, blurry outlines that seemed to shift and ripple like smoke, but they carried an unmistakable air of malevolence. Janet would wake in the dead of night, paralyzed by a heavy pressure on her chest, as if someone or something was sitting on her, pressing the air out of her lungs. She would struggle to breathe, feeling an intense, almost suffocating presence near her face. Sometimes she swore she could hear faint breathing just inches from her ear. Soon, objects around the house began moving with alarming force. Plates would fly off the shelves, furniture would shift in the dead of night, and even locked doors would suddenly burst open. The Smurls tried to rationalize it at first. Perhaps it was a draft, a loose latch. But the intensity of the incidents kept escalating. One evening, Jack watched in horror as the door of a cupboard creaked open on its own, revealing nothing but darkness within. A sudden rush of icy air washed over him, chilling him to the bone. He tried to ignore it, but deep down, he knew this was no trick of the mind. He could feel a presence, something unexplainable and sinister that seemed to be watching, waiting.
Sometimes they would catch a fleeting glimpse of these shadowy figures standing in doorways or the corners of rooms. As soon as they looked, the apparitions would vanish, leaving them questioning their own sanity. The presence seemed to enjoy tormenting them, hiding just out of reach, only to reappear when they least expected it.
The Smurls' once peaceful home had become a place of fear, where each shadow, each sound, seemed to carry the threat of something darker. They no longer felt safe within their own walls, and each day, the dread seemed to grow. It was no longer just a haunting. It was an invasion. What started as small, unsettling disturbances quickly escalated into outright physical attacks on the Smurl family. The entity's hostility became disturbingly personal, as it began targeting Jack and Janet with unrelenting ferocity. Janet described feeling sharp, sudden scratches across her arms and back, leaving marks that couldn't be ignored. The sensation was like being clawed by something with nails as sharp as razors. Jack would wake up in the middle of the night feeling like he'd been grabbed or slapped by an unseen hand. Bruises and welts appeared on his skin, each one a silent, haunting message that he was no longer safe. Even in his own home, a foul, sour smell would suddenly fill the air, lingering in each room without any apparent source. They would describe it as rotting flesh or burning sulfur, a stench so strong it left them nauseated. The smell was often the only warning before the attacks began, as if the entity took pleasure in making its presence known. With each attack, the Smurls felt more trapped, more isolated, as if they were prisoners in their own home. Helpless against this force, they could only wonder how far it would go, and if they would survive its wrath. Despite their resilience, the relentless assaults took their toll on the Smurl family's mental and physical health. The once cozy family home had turned into a place of terror, where the darkness seemed to reach out, binding them in invisible chains of fear. Desperate for answers, the Smurls reached out to renowned paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. Known for their investigations of haunted houses and possessions, the Warrens were no strangers to the paranormal. When they arrived, they immediately sensed an oppressive energy in the home, claiming the house was the site of a powerful and evil presence. After documenting countless disturbances, Ed and Lorraine recommended an exorcism to rid the home of its malevolent spirits. A priest was brought in to perform multiple exorcisms. During one session, witnesses claimed to have seen objects levitate and heard strange voices, but rather than weakening, the entity seemed to grow more aggressive. Word of the Smurl Haunting began to spread. Local news stations picked up the story, and soon reporters from across the country came to interview the family. The public was divided. Some sympathized with the Smurls, while others believed it was all a hoax. Skeptics accused the Warrens of using the story to fuel their fame, while others saw the family as victims of forces beyond their understanding. Despite the public attention and the exorcisms, the haunting persisted. The Smurls faced relentless attacks from unseen forces. Jack reportedly witnessed a black, shadowy mass, which would rush at him or morph into grotesque figures. Janet's health began to suffer, her physical and mental state deteriorating under the constant stress. Unable to escape or even sell the house, the Smurls felt trapped in their personal horror story. After nearly a decade of unrelenting paranormal torment, peace finally settled over the Smurl family's home. In the years leading up to 1989, the disturbances seemed to grow less frequent and eventually ceased. This calm didn't come in one dramatic moment. It was a gradual lessening of noises, shadows, and apparitions, as though the force itself was losing interest. With the decision to leave, the Smurls felt a bittersweet mix of emotions. After all, this was the home they'd wanted to raise their children in, a place that had initially brought hope, but had become a prison of fear. Leaving meant a fresh start, but the memories and scars of the haunting would be with them forever. The Smurls weren't the only ones haunted by their experiences. The story of their struggles against dark forces struck a chord with people around the world. In 1986, the family shared their story in the book The Haunted, co-authored with journalist Robert Curran. This deeply personal account became a bestseller, pulling readers into the Smurls' terrifying ordeal, while leaving the question open: was it all real? The Smurls' story didn't end there. The tale of their battle with the unknown was so compelling that, in 1991, it was adapted into a television movie also titled The Haunted. Directed by Robert Mandel, the film brought the Smurl Haunting to life on screen, with performances by actors Sally Kirkland as Janet Smurl and Jeffrey Demon as Jack Smurl. The chilling adaptation reignited the debate over the supernatural, drawing even more attention to the family's horrifying experiences. Today, the house remains quiet, with no reports of activity from its new occupants. Perhaps whatever lurked in those walls moved on, or maybe it was never there at all. But one thing is certain, the haunting has forever changed the Smurl family, and their story continues to captivate those who dare to believe. To this day, the Smurl Haunting remains one of the most controversial paranormal cases in history. Was the Smurl family genuinely haunted by dark spirits? Or was it a case of psychological stress magnified by media attention? Perhaps we may never know the full truth, but the legacy of the Smurl Haunting has become a chilling chapter in the world of the supernatural. The tale of the Smurl family reminds us of the thin line between reality and the supernatural. What would you do if faced with a force you couldn't explain? Share your thoughts, experiences, or even your own stories in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales from the shadows.